Chapter 5 of Nip and Tuck by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 5, in which Nip and Tuck make their first big haul. Some days passed before the announcement expected by Tuck was made on the exchange that the COD road had gobbled up the X, Y, and Z line, and thereby secured an entrance to New York City. Of course, when it was at last made, the stock of the former road began to boom at once, and there was a scramble among brokers to get a hold of some of it. It was soon found to be very scarce on the market, those on the inside having quietly got a hold of about all that had been floating around. This fact sent the stock kiting toward par, and the whole list was sympathetically affected, so that the bulls were having things pretty much their own way. Nip, whose tendencies were generally of the bearish order, having discounted the situation in advance because of the knowledge which had come to him through his connection with the deal, changed front and bought D&G to the extent of his pile, on the recommendation of Mr. Billings, whose knowledge of the Hoffman House syndicate plans enabled him to judge what other roads would be most favorably affected by the advance of COD. Thus both of the boys were interested in the rise, though neither said anything on the subject to the other. The papers were now full of good things to be picked up in Wall Street while the boom lasted, and consequently the public, or lambs, as they are facetiously called by the brokers, flocked in droves to the financial district with a savings of months, out of which many of them expected to realize easy fortunes. This made business lively and prosperous in Wall Street. Thousands of shares exchanged hands every day now. That meant extra clerks and overtime generally. After dark, electric lights glowed from hundreds of windows that heretofore had shown no signs of life at that hour, and in a general prosperity Nip and Tuck came in for a small share outside of their own particular little ventures. Both had a standing advertisement in 2 or 3 New York dailies which had extensive out-of-town circulation, and in consequence many commissions came their way from strangers, which they executed with an honesty not always to be found in Wall Street. "If things keep on this way, Tuck," said Nip one evening as he ran against his friend in the elevator on his return from supper, "I'll have to get a larger office and employ my own stenographer. Things are getting pretty cramped with me. My office boy is such a fat little monkey that between the both of us we quite fill the room. If I had 2 customers call at the same time," he added with a grin, "I'd have to place a chair for one of them out in the corridor." "Glad you're doing so well, Nip. You can have my room next week, as I have taken Jokum's suite out front from the 15th institution," said Tuck, looking patronizingly at his companion. "You haven't," gasped Nip, stopping stock still in the corridor and looking at his friend as if he believed he must be joking. "Ask the janitor if you don't believe me," replied Tuck with a cheerful smile. "Business is simply piling up on me at such a rate I had either to move or be swamped. You needn't send your typewriting upstairs after this. I've engaged a shorthand artist and Remington manipulator that will do it for us both." This was a bitter pill for Nip. The very idea that Tuck was forging ahead of him was a disquieting reflection. He really could not understand it, but he put the best face on the matter he could. "I've been looking around a week myself for better quarters in this building, but there didn't seem to be anything vacant. How'd you happen to get Jokum's room?" "Just as soon as the announcement of his death was circulated, I interviewed the janitor to see if the rooms would be vacated or not, and when I found that they would be, I grabbed them. Since then there's been a score of applications for the suite, and when it came out that I had them engaged, I had a dozen offers for my option, but of course I wasn't letting a good thing like that slip." "Well, there's a door between your present office and mine. I'll take your place until I can do better. After all, it isn't the show one makes so much as the business one does, eh, Tuck?" "Is that a crack at me, Nip?" "Not at all, unless the cap fits," laughed Nip as he entered his den, leaving Tuck to do likewise. Next morning Nip found a letter in the mail from his country girl, Laura Joyce. Not only was he delighted to hear from her, but an enclosure gave him great satisfaction. It was an order for him to invest $500 for her to the best advantage in stocks, and it was accompanied by a check signed by her aunt, who was her guardian. He would not have felt quite so happy if he had known that George Tuck next door had received a similarly worded letter with a like enclosure, requesting the handsome young broker to invest the amount of the accompanying check as his judgment dictated, also signed very sincerely yours, Laura Joyce. Both young brokers patted themselves on the back and hastened to do the bidding of their fair Laura, and, funny to relate, both of them bought 100 shares of the same stock, M&N, at 48, for Miss Joyce's account. On the 15th of the month, Tuck moved into the late Mr. Jockham's small front suite overlooking Wall Street, while Nip, not being able to do better, added Tuck's former quarters to his own. Nicholas declined Tuck's friendly offer of part of the services of his new stenographer, a pretty little blonde of 17, and installed his own private shorthand operator, a handsome brunette of 18. "I'm not going to let Tuck blow over me any more than I can help. I might have had Jockham's office myself if I had known about it in time. Well, I'll bet I'm going to do as much business as he is just the same. I guess I need a bookkeeper." He advertised and hired one next day. "I guess I've got one point on Tuck all right." But when he met his friend going to lunch, he told him he'd hired a bookkeeper on account of rush business. He found Tuck had employed one himself the day before. Nip's messenger was short, fat, and 14. Tuck's was tall, thin, and 15. The pair had imbibed a mutual contempt for one another, and were always scrapping when they met, either on the street, stairs, or in the corridor, and Nip and Tuck had their hands full trying to keep them apart. Clarence Pratt, the fat boy, generally got the short end of the mix-ups, and for all that, he was too spunky to give in to Peter Klein, the thin youth. "A broker's office is no place for you," he sneered one morning as he ran against Tuck's messenger. "What do you know about it, you animated billiard ball?" jeered Klein, scenting trouble as usual. "Whoa!" retorted Clarence. "If I had your face, I'd hire myself out to an undertaker as an ornament for a hearse." "You would, eh? You're too lippy altogether for a kid of your age." And he gave the fat boy a sudden shove. They happened to be near the main stairway, and Clarence lost his balance. The stairs were of polished marble, and the fat boy rolled down them slicker than greased lightning. There were 10 steps, and then a turn. As he slid around the curve, he struck the legs of a tall, ministerial-looking gentleman in a close-fitting Prince Albert and white choker, who was slowly walking up with the gravity befitting his calling. In another moment, the atmosphere in that particular locality was filled with a mixture of arms and legs as the reverend gentleman turned a complete somersault and lighted on the small of his back, while Clarence, hardly retarded in his flight, continued on to the landing of the floor below, bouncing into the arms of the assistant janitor of the building and frightening that individual most to death. Clarence, feeling there was trouble in the air for him, scooted for the next flight, and was running up the street a moment later on the errand upon which Nip had dispatched him. As for Peter Klein, he sought the cover of Tuck's office in a hurry. The minister picked himself up, and, finding no bones broken and the cause of his mishap nowhere in sight, continued on his way to Redstone's office, where he was bound with a part of his salary to buy a certain stock somebody had assured him was a winner. That same day, Tuck sold out his COD holdings at 110, making a profit of $45 on a share. As he had bought 1,700 shares, his profits, not counting the commission due his broker, was $76,500. And the next day, when he deposited his check in the bank, the balance mounted to $87,000, a very respectable capital for a young broker to accumulate in a few weeks. He also had Miss Joyce's 500 shares of M&N disposed of at a profit of $6 a share, notifying her that her balance in his hands was now $3,375, and asking for instructions as to what he should do with it. Nip's profits on D&G, which he had sold the day before, amounted to $36,000, raising his bank account to $43,000. He also had Miss Joyce's stock sold out at the profit of $5 a share, and he wrote her that he held the sum of $2,875 subject to her order. So between her pair of admirers, the young lady had realized a profit of over $5,000, after all expenses had been deducted. "Aren't they just too delightfully smart for anything, Aunt Phoebe?" she remarked to her guardian and chaperone the day she received the letters from Nicholas, Nip, and George Tuck. "But they didn't send you the money they say you have made," replied the maiden lady cautiously. "Oh, I don't want it back. I'm going to leave it with them so that they can make some more with it," she cried in ecstasy. "Why, Mr. Tuck says he made over $75,000 during the recent boom in Wall Street, while Mr. Nip has cleared $35,000. It won't be long before both of them are millionaires." When her aunt left the room, she stood the photographs of the two boys up in front of her on the dressing case and began to wonder which of them she liked the best. "Aren't they just too handsome for anything?" she mused. But just then the bell rang for supper, and so she left the question undecided for the present. End of chapter 5.